Hello, welcome to Chiropractic Roots, the official podcast of the Kansas Chiropractic Association. Here we explore the stories, struggles, and successes of chiropractors across the Sunflower State. In each episode, we interview Kansas DCs to learn how their chiropractic journey began, how their practices took shape, and what lessons they've learned along the way. Whether you're a seasoned professional, a student, or simply chiropractic curious, you're in the right place to hear from the roots of the profession. I'm Dr. Travis Haller, Executive Director of the Kansas Chiropractic Association, the nation's first chiropractic association. Let's get adjusted. Our guest today is Dr. Tobi Jeurink. Dr. Jeurink,
Okay.
welcome to Chiropractic Roots. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, yeah, my name is Dr. Jeurink, and I've been in practice for 23 years. So I graduated from Cleveland in 2001. I have a private practice in Gardner, and then I also still teach at Cleveland University. My practice is a little more functional medicine based. There's still chiropractic involved. We work kind of towards a lot of the nutritional and that type of component.
So, can you tell me what your first experience with chiropractic was?
I actually had chiropractic at a pretty young age. I had a lot of back pain as a child, and I didn't realize until I was a teenager that I actually had ankylosing spondylitis. So that was, and my chiropractor was the one that made the appropriate referral to get me diagnosed when realizing at a young age I was, needing too much chiropractic care for my age. So that's, yeah, my first experience.
So, with AS, have you noticed any way that you've had to modify the way you practiced?
A little bit. I don't do a whole lot of like side posture maneuvers. I do some when it's warranted. I don't do a lot of things that might require me to be in one position for a long period of time. Just kind of need that movement base. So a lot of my techniques are a little bit more low force, but we do some traditional diversified and some different types of techniques. But other than that, as long as my nutrition is on track, I really don't have a lot of issues with the inflammation and stuff associated with the AS.
So, when did you decide to become a chiropractor?
Actually, when I was in undergraduate, I was going to be a medical doctor, and I started to look into medical schools and started to look into DO schools. And looking at DO schools and finding out that most of the DO schools, the adjustments were electives, the nutrition were electives if they offered them. And I knew I wanted to include nutrition. I knew I wanted to include ingesting if I was going to be a doctor. So I talked to my chiropractor at the time, and he explained a little bit more to me about some of the advanced work you could do in chiropractic, some of the diplomate programs and some of the options there. And so that's what kind of turned me towards chiropractic versus MD or DO school.
hmm And when did you attend chiropractic college?
98 through 2001. It was at Cleveland at the old campus. So in the church and in the auditorium there. So yeah.
Do you remember how much you paid for college or if you had any debt when you graduated?
Oh, yeah, I don't remember what the tuition was, but I think I ended up with about $130,000 in debt, which at the time in 2001, which we happened to graduate about 3 weeks before 9/11. So at that time, it was a lot and it was a big, substantial, which I realize now seems, a lot less than what people are graduating with now. So.
Yes, it certainly is. So tell me about your first practice.
Yeah, so my first practice is still my current practice, moved around a little bit, changed just a little bit. But I bought a practice in Gardner. And so basically we changed it a little bit because the practice I bought was kind of a membership model. And I found out a lot of patients came in and got adjusted almost more for a social reason than for needing adjustment. So, we switched it more to pay for service and, treatment plans and working it through that way. And then eventually, really advanced it into more the nutritional and functional medicine. So we've had two physical offices, but both under the same business.
Now, when you bought, how did that transition of buying the practice work for you?
It was probably okay at the time and for, what the options were at the time. I was very fortunate that was able to buy a house during chiropractic school, so I had some collateral, where most people I don't think kind of have that going in. So, and looking at the price I paid for them, what the income was for the first couple of years, it probably wasn't the best business advice. I don't think any good business person would have gone for that. Luckily, I had a very good banker that also kind of explained a little bit to me, being young and first business. She kind of explained some things that I would need to do as far as taking out a loan to be able to pay myself. We all want to be thinking that, hey, we're going to make a profit off the first month or at least first year. And she kind of explained the way things really worked. And luckily, I was still in practice, a couple of years in where a lot of my colleagues and then other businesses, even the same area, didn't have the same luck or same fortune because they again didn't obviously didn't have the advice that I had. So,
It's always about who you get your advice from. So that'll bring me to my next question. Did you have a mentor early in your career?
oh goodness, I can't say I had one mentor, but luckily I had quite a few, and most of them I called my chiropractic uncles, and it was through the KCA. So, Dr. McKenzie, Dr. Hazy, there's quite a few others that I should have wrote down because the names are not coming to me right at the moment. But one of the fortunate things I did was join the KCA in school, and I was able to go to NCLC and meet a lot of doctors there, and then join up with the KCA and NCLC, and so that became kind of my mentorship program, the unofficial mentorship program. So I was able to kind of use that, and then had a lot of yeah, unclely and advice along the way that kind of helped me and really directed some of my thought process.
What would you say is a good, important piece of advice that you got from a mentor when you were new in practice?
One of the things that it wasn't necessarily for a mentor, but I remember this one very specifically from a lecturer. And one of the lectures that said, you can't learn something you think you already know. And that was just really kind of a turning point of opening my eyes to, we kind of want to think we learned a lot in school or learned a lot even our first few years of practice. But sometimes being able to take a second look at things and look at them differently. Because if we think we know it and we just kind of just you put the advice off to the side or put the information off to the side, we really haven't evaluated the information for what it's worth. So that's probably one of my favorite just single tidbits that kind of opens your eyes to, a lot of experiences.
I like that. I've got to figure out a way to get my son to understand that part, though.
I think all of us as teenagers go through some part of that, some lasting into our
Yes.
20s and 30s.
Yes. So, how about marketing when you first opened up? How did you market your practice?
Oh goodness. That's probably my downfall still to this day is I'm not big on marketing. So I really try to do, a lot of it just through practice building word of mouth, educating my patients, from that standpoint. I really found out that, honestly, the biggest bit of marketing I ever got was not me doing it, was a thank you letter that someone put in the newspaper. And, any other ad or anything else I paid for in the newspaper didn't do anything. And same thing now with currently with Facebook ads and things along that line. The return on investment just seems so small compared to the internal referrals. And really what I tell the students too is a lot of times when you spend time with a patient, you're not marketing and some people call it soft marketing, but you're really not. You're just creating a relationship. And so I feel like most of ours has been, relationship building, and we'll throw a few ads out here or there or do some things, and it just doesn't seem to pay off the same way as the time that you spend in the treatment room and in the interview room with the patient.
So, when you're in those rooms, how do you work to build trust and retention with your patients?
So one of the things I do is I don't, there's a computer in one of my rooms, it's not in both my rooms. Most of the time I take in a piece of paper with a couple of notes on there that I've looked at their history from the online, thing that they input, make sure I, understood their major complaints and some of the concerns that they have. And then we just have a conversation and I look them in the eyes and we face each other. There's not a desk between us. It's just two people talking. And I jot down notes while we're talking. And sometimes that scribble gets hard to read later on and I have to jog my memory a little bit. But I've been very put off by other doctors, and I've had patients say the same thing that when someone's sitting there typing stuff into the computer and not actually looking at them, I think that makes a big disconnect. You cannot see, part of what we conversate about, what we hear, right? But just like now doing Zoom, I think we realize it a little bit more that, we need to see people face to face. And so, doing that in an interview process and in a history taking process, I think is hugely important because you can't see someone's, the tear run down their face, or you can't see the way that they look away when you ask a question that's, something that's a deep deep thought process. And there's just a lot more connection that occurs if you're able to have that one-on-one with the patient versus it just being about data collecting.
I agree. So many get stuck in the idea of I've got to get this information into the computer instead of making sure the patient understands that you're actually hearing what they say.
Yeah. And it is tough. And again, sometimes we'll forget little things here and there, but I think it's, when you have the big picture, those you can oscillate patient later, remind me what you said about this, fill this, fill in this detail. You can always do that. But to open up that relationship and then to kind of really get your patients are going to tell you what's wrong with them. And maybe it's because they Googled it, maybe they're right. But a lot of times they'll if they're going to tell you in the story, and if you've done it enough, you're going to pick up what's wrong with them or what's how to fix them. Sometimes it's not what's wrong, but what they really need encouragement wise or goal setting wise and how to what they need. And so you don't pick that up by making sure you got your all your T's crossed and I's dotted and all your check boxes in your computer system. And so I think sometimes that's done of us a disservice by having all these computers. From a reviewer standpoint, reviewing enough notes, I appreciate the computers. And yes, you still want to put the documentation in there. You still want to get it correctly as much as possible and have clean notes. But that can be fixed on the back side when you have time to sit down and do it in a proper format. And so versus trying to click those boxes when you're talking to a patient.
So, how long were you in practice before you felt like you had it under control? You knew what you were doing.
I'll let you know. Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those things, and I know some of my mentors have kind of said the same thing. And just when you think, kind of like just when you think you've learned it all, you find out you haven't. And just when you think, you've kind of figured it out, there's always something that gets thrown your way that you have to. And I think that's part of, practice management is learning how to adjust, right? To learning how to adjust to a situation and be able to do it in a way that it doesn't disrupt everything and everyone else around you. But there's definitely things you learn along the way as far as feeling, a little more secure that you're going to make your month-to-month payroll, that you're going to be able to, make your month-to-month, things along that line. But, I've been through audits, I've been through, records requests, things along that line that you thought, why is that happening? And you thought you did your best up to that point, and there's just some things out of your control. And then, and at the time it is stressful, but then you learn how to respond in a way that's appropriate and it's one of those things that you adapt and you move forward. So I don't think anyone could ever say that they have the perfect practice model. And if it is, it's not right for everyone. It's you gotta make what's right for you. And hopefully if you adapt along the way, because in the 23 years of practice, we've had to adapt to computer systems. We've had to adapt to new equipment. We've had to adapt to, different laws, different regulations, different insurance models and things like that. So if you're not willing to adapt, you're probably not going to last that long. So,
It's all about being able to figure out how to do the right thing at that time and move on to the next thing.
yep,
So,
it's constant. It's like life, it changes.
yes, it does. So, how do you think chiropractic has changed since you first started practicing?
Yeah, and that's really interesting. It's it's changed and it stayed the same. So there's some things that have changed. I feel like the core of chiropractic is still what it's always been, that looking for the model of disease, that we look and we evaluate for not just the diagnosis. And I think that's really important to understand that we evaluate for what went wrong and when it went wrong and how it went wrong. And that's going to give us the answer to how to correct it. So, there's different techniques. There's a lot of different things that have come along, come and gone in the 20 some years that I practiced. And it's so I think to say that chiropractic's changed a whole lot, I wouldn't say that. There's just a lot of things that come and go. But I think the core comes down to it is if we understand the human body and understand that it's one body versus certain separate pieces and parts. And then even you can take your model if you want to be a principal chiropractor, if you want to be a straight or however the terminology is often changed along the way too as well, a mixer, whatever it is. But if we go back to that root of that model of disease, then most of us are practicing within that chiropractic model, no matter whether we're doing more, Gonstead or more nutrition or more labs or things along that line. If we're, looking at that from in, functional medicine calls it the root cause. Well, chiropractors have been looking at root cause since, day one. So yes, it's changed and we've updated. I think we've gotten better about integrating with other providers. So I think that's awesome. I think we've gotten better about communicating the real, the science behind chiropractic. So I think pe more people are understanding. We're less outcasts, I think, in most places. There's still some barriers to break. But I don't think the core of chiropractic and the to me that hasn't changed a whole lot and it shouldn't change a whole lot.
I know that you don't necessarily live in the community that you practice in. How do you maintain a connection with your local community with that distance between the two?
I'll be very honest. I probably don't do a great job of it. And part of that is I grew up in a very small town, and I knew growing up that I didn't necessarily want to every time I went to the grocery store, talk to someone for 20 minutes and be able to, carry my office outside of practice. So I probably do a little bit differently than some people do. Um, we try to give back to the community, help out with the prom or whatever event that's coming up if our patients ask us for some support in those areas. Um, and I used to be involved in some different clubs. Time-wise, it just became where it interfered with our office hours. So I would say to young practitioners, yes. And when I first started into practice, we were involved with Kiwanis, we were involved with the Rotary Club, we were involved with the local chamber and things along that line. I'm still a member of a couple of those. Um, and so again, I think it is important when you're starting out, and I should do a better job of it. It's just where my practice has evolved a little bit to we see people throughout the state and throughout two states, Kansas and Missouri. We have a lot of people that travel because we are a little bit more of a specialty clinic. So yeah, but starting out, and I think it is very important and it's still important to respect your community. And even if you're not, fully 100% engaged. And again, sometimes that goes up to your personality. And some people, I know there's some great providers that are, that's what they want. They want people to knock on their door and be able to get adjusted on a weekend. And again, it has to go to your personality type. And I think sometimes, no matter what practice management, because that's practice management I've got advice I've gotten before is you need to be more involved in your community. You need to do, this and that. But I don't feel comfortable in some of those social situations because I'm not a small talker. So I think you have to be true to yourself too. So in that way, it's one of those things that you make what works for you, and again, but still be supportive of your community, even if you're not 100% involved in those things.
What do you know now that you wish you knew when you first opened your practice?
Oh, the more I learn, the more I forget. Um, I think some of it is going back to patience, and I think in that when you first open your practice, you're in such a fight or flight mode. And in a way, you have to be because, that every paycheck's, not guaranteed. And it's still not. It never is when you own your own business. Um, but I think not not sweating the small stuff as much. I think if I had kind of seen some of the bigger picture on things, and maybe that would have spent less time worrying about tackling, going after the small stuff, and maybe a little bit more time going after that big picture, and still, being able to, and it's kind of like sometimes you're not dreaming big enough. Like there's sometimes I think there could be a bigger picture that we spend so much time tackling all the small little things that when I'm get my notes done, I'm going to do this. When I finish this, I'm gonna work on that bigger project, or I'm gonna, do better job at my patient communication, whatever it is. And I think as a business owner, sometimes we get so caught up in the little things that we don't have a bigger picture of, again, way we can be involved in the community, or the way we can be involved with our patients, or the way that we can educate our patients. Sometimes we lose that. So I think maybe not. You have to pay attention to small things. Don't let your bank account go bad. Don't let, all those little things that have to happen, but maybe not fret so much over them, and maybe not, let them eat up so much of your time and your bandwidth.
How do you balance practice with teaching?
Still working on that one. Yeah, still working on that one. I think one of the things for me is because I get so much out of teaching personally from a standpoint of I love seeing that sparkle when someone gets the aha moment when you're talking about something and you see someone's face perk up, or all of a sudden you can tell they're listening, and being able to have that little bit of a captive audience. And then when they ask questions that I don't know, and I'm like, they're thinking, right? Because it's one of those things, if they can regurgitate basic information, that's great. But if they're asking questions that make you think, then they're thinking. And I think seeing that part of it makes it a little bit easier. And then sometimes it makes me learn more. And then a lot of times I'll take some of that, the questions, the way the student asks a question, it makes me think, well, what if the patient's asking that same question but afraid to ask? And so I think sometimes I learn from teaching enough to be able to take that into practice. And vice versa, I feel like being able to provide real life situations, real life labs, real life scenarios to the students that, hopefully they get more out of it from that standpoint. And then at the same time, standpoint, when I'm like talking about a patient or I'm lecturing or I'm combining that information, sometimes I get that moment like, oh, that's what I missed.
So you have a diplomate. Tell me a little bit about it.
So the diplomate's an American Board of Chiropractic internist, and I like to call it the original functional medicine doctor. And in fact, there is a journal that's been out there longer than most functional medicine programs called the Original Internist. And it's a program where you spend 300 hours, and you can start it while you're in chiropractic school, or you can start outside of chiropractic school, but you have to be a licensed doctor to test and be certified as a diplomate. And so we learn a lot of internal medicine types of processes like reading labs, EKGs, a lot of those different types of things, and take them to a step above even some of the basics that we had in chiropractic school with that. And then we utilize that to basically treat patients from a model. Again, now it's more commonly termed as functional medicine, but again, the ABCs were doing that long before that. So we're able to apply the knowledge base and the science knowledge base that, we look at from labs and from tests and things along that line, but then employ nutrition and exercise and lifestyle management and changes in that. And so by doing that, we get to see people again make drastic changes to their life and to their way that they think about things too as well. So it is a 300-hour program. It is, people think it was expensive, but it's, when you look at relativity of things, it's even when I was doing the program, I didn't start it until I was in school for about 3 years, I believe, and I started the program. But it's one of those things that at that time we were doing live programs is before COVID and all the 2020 and everything being online. So we were doing live programs, but every time I went to a program on a weekend, that Monday a patient walked in that I felt I could help that I wouldn't have been able to help if I hadn't been at that program that weekend. So it really kind of pays for itself, but it opens up a world of, ways to help people in multiple different directions.
It's not on the list that I was going to tell. I'm going to ask you, but any clinical pearls that you want to give today?
Oh, goodness. Um, I don't know if it's clinical pearl, but it's what I lecture about a lot, and some people have heard this a lot, but it's um, you know, and now it's finally starting to be talking about. We've got to look at you've got to start looking at what people are putting in your body, breathing in their body, and it's not just from the functional medicine chiropractic internist standpoint, but when we look at the importance of the way of how a patient reacts to an adjustment, if they don't have the proper nervous system integration between the gut brain axis and the proper nervous center innervation between the spine and the brain that requires proper nutrition, then chiropractic is amazing, but when you're working on a body that doesn't have the ability to utilize that information that you're giving with that adjustment, it falls flat, or and sometimes it makes the patient worse because they're completely inflamed. And so I think it's in a day and age where we have to look at those things, even if before, 50 years ago, we didn't have the same chemicals and toxins and everything else that we have now. And so it's not really a pearl, it's not really hidden. I think I'm going to emphasize it. We'll call it that way. It's an emphasis that I just see too many, because I see a lot of patients that get referred because chiropractic's not working, because PT is not working, because the exercise is making them inflamed. And once we address those things, then the chiropractic works, then everything else works. So
Hard to rebuild a house while it's still on fire.
that's a very excellent analogy. It is. You're just constantly, it's like pouring water in a bucket with leaks, just keep putting water in and, water's leaking out. So if you don't replenish it, yeah, it's not going to work.
Yeah. What advice would you give new graduates now?
Oh, goodness. And that's probably changed at what I would have said 15 or 20 years ago. Um, you know, I, graduates are coming out with a lot bigger cost, a lot bigger burden, than, what we came out with, 20 some years ago. Um, the thing is to, kind of like the eating elephant, you got one piece at a time. You cannot look at that huge bill and then all of a sudden think and that you're going to be able to absorb that all at once. I think sometimes too, and what I see some graduates doing is coming out looking for the biggest paycheck and not the biggest like learning experience or biggest satisfaction. Because a lot of times I see a lot of graduates nowadays, they're coming out and going through 3 or 4 different, where they work for someone for 3 months, they work for someone else for 3 months, someone else for 3 months. And sometimes you may not, it's scary to come out and have that student loan due. You can defer, there's other things that you can do, but you really kind of have to find a model that works for you and find a mentor, find someone that works for you. And the other side of that is if you do some of those experiences and they're not good experiences, you're still learning. So again, if you find something you think that's what you want to do and you realize it's not, you've learned probably more than the person that fell into the place of where they want to be instantly, right? So probably take those bad and good experiences and call them experiences and go from there. But I do think it's a tougher world. I mean, again, we came out, Dr. Aller and I graduated around the same time. We came out right around the time of 9/11, and the world was a different world than even 6 months before when we were in school. And so, it's going to change. Some things are going to change. A lot of people that graduated, right around COVID or went to school halfway through COVID, things were a lot different than, what they are now. So I guess just take it, take little bits of pieces at a time and, absorb some of that and then, keep working with it and you'll find something and what you start out thinking you're going to do isn't always what you think you're going to do. And so it's one of those things you may have a big picture, big idea, and that falls flat the first 6 months or whatever it is. But again, learn from it and then decide if that's, maybe you want to do something else or look at something, a different way of practicing or a different model.
Yeah, every failure is a lesson.
Yep.
And if you can take something from it, it's not really a failure.
Yep. Absolutely. And it's, a lot of, I tell my students too, they learn more from that test question they missed than they learn from the 80 test questions they got right. And so you learn more from your failures than you do your successes. Because you think about success, you might remember a little bit what got you there, but you just remember the feeling at the end. Whereas a failure, you look back upon and you analyze it and you go, okay, so here's what you learn so much more. So again, yeah, it's not really a failure, it's a learning experience.
I agree. Good. So one last uncomfortable question before I get to the fun ones. Do you have an exit strategy?
Oh my. And we're in fact right now in the middle of kind of a revamping of the office and a couple things, and so I'm not going to relay all that stuff that's going on right now. But um, yeah, it's kind of really try to build up a practice that is not just functional medicine, not just chiropractic, but a group of providers that is, a good natural healthcare model and be able to help people sustain and help them build their part of that practice. So that, when I'm ready to go and to exit, that, there's something for someone else to step into, and it's not just me leaving, and it's not my name leaving. It's basically that we're stepping into a healthcare model that we provided a good quality of care on a very rounded basis for our community. And again, we get a lot of referrals from all across this bi-state area and some other places too as well. And then on top of that, I was very fortunate very early on, and I will tell you this, maybe one pearl from a business side of things, is even when you think you can't put money in your retirement plan, put money in your savings, because it's one of those things. And then every time you're able to give yourself a raise, make sure you're fully funding that retirement plan first. Because again, it's we think, oh, we're gonna get a raise, we're gonna spend it here, we're gonna spend it there. It's, Social Security, none of that stuff is guaranteed. And again, if you start with that plan, very early on. Like I said, I had some good family members and also some good business advice very early to be able to, start setting aside money, and, invest it wisely as much as you can. And by no means am I rich, but it's one of those things you always think when you're first there, you can't do that. But if it's $5 out of, every thousand, that's still $5 every thousand, for 25 years, for 30 years, for, again, and that's going to build upon itself a lot faster than a quick scheme or a quick marketing scheme that you think is going to make you a big buck all of a sudden. So I think, yeah, plan well, but also, find yourself a good mentor. And I did have a few of those too through the KCA, some good mentors that we talked business and we talked some of those things that you should really do that seem hard at the time, but they are important.
Yeah, that's good advice. I've always heard pay yourself first, and you've really got to think about your future. So good
Yep.
advice there. So on to the fun stuff. First one, work-life balance. How do you maintain that balance between work and a personal life, and what do you do to blow off steam?
Well, I'll be honest, I didn't do well with it for a long time. So I worked a lot, I volunteered a lot, KCA, ACA, and so there wasn't a huge balance initially. But the way I balance things now and built into it along the way after I felt like you didn't have to give 80 hours to your practice. I do triathlons, just did one last weekend. My husband and I do gravel riding, so gravel bike riding. We have adopted a new dog. We have a retired greyhound who also is our unofficial therapy dog at the office. So again, there's some balance in there. And then we love to travel. So it took me about 10 years into practice before I felt like I could take a 2-week vacation. But ever since then, I haven't looked back, as far as making sure that I get a 2-week vacation. And every year we try to pick a new country or a new region or new somewhere to go and experience the culture, experience other people, experience, get a little bit of world experience. And along the way, I learn a lot. So I can take some of that back from the training, the athletic training, and also even from other cultures and how they eat and things like that. And so even though I don't write us as a business expense, I'm not telling you to do that, but we learn a lot. And so I'm able to bring that in and some of that life experience in for my patients and my students. So I feel like it kind of helps keep that balance and justifies a little bit of the extra fun and extra time away from the office that I still feel like there's, a learning balance that occurs in that.
Yeah, that's the corollary to the pay yourself first. You've also got to treat yourself first too. You've got to
Yep.
make sure that you take care of yourself in order to help patients.
Yep. Yeah, and you really do. And fortunately, from that side of things, I mean, get adjusted and I see, at least one of my chiropractors, I have several, depending on what I got going on at the time. I see at least one of them every 2 to 3 weeks, and I get a massage every month. Like I said, you've got to take care of yourself and, use those toys, use your lasers, use the stuff you have in your office and make sure you take a minute for yourself. It's not always easy, and I don't always do it perfectly, but yeah, you have to do that too as well.
I know way too many doctors that the only time they get adjusted is at convention.
Uh-huh.
Twice a year is not often enough.
Yeah, no, no. If we're telling our patients they need adjusted every 2 to 6 weeks, so we have to follow. And that's another thing of it, that maybe a little bit of a pearl is patients aren't going to do what you tell them. They're going to do what you do. And so I can't go tell a patient to exercise if I'm not exercising. I can't tell a patient to eat right if I've got a Pepsi can in my office. And so it's one of those things that, yeah, if you're living it, they'll follow it. If you're just preaching you're probably not going to get a lot of following.
So, last question here. If you weren't a chiropractor, what would have you done?
Ooh, I mean, I really don't know. I look back at even some goal setting things I did in elementary school and junior high school, and doctor was first thing on my list. It wasn't always a chiropractor. Again, I kind of re-educated what chiropractor, even though I saw a chiropractor since I was 5, I re-educated myself. From a doctor standpoint, after I started teaching dermatology, I, probably would have been a dermatologist because I find it fascinating. Outside of that, I wasn't ever good enough, but pro athlete, but wasn't ever good enough at anything else to. So honestly, I don't know. If this fails, I'm in trouble.
Okay. Well, Dr. Jeurink, thank you for joining us today on Chiropractic Roots. Before we end those, is there anything else you want to add?
Yeah, just Dr. Lally, I think it's a great idea, opening things up to young doctors and old doctors alike. I'm glad when people get to share their stories. And but yes, be a member of the state association, be a member of a national association, your choice, or both, which are three, whichever ones you want to do. But be involved because um, there's just so much out there that you don't know that you don't know. And so that's where Dr. Aller and the board and a lot of the members have been dedicated for years. They know things that you don't know that you need to know. And so, that's my last pitch. I would say just, utilize your state association because that's what they're there for, to give you information and to help you out when you need it. So,
Thank you so much for being here.
yep, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for tuning in to Chiropractic Roots, brought to you by the Kansas Chiropractic Association. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a fellow chiropractor or student. To learn more about the KCA and our mission to support chiropractic in Kansas, visit kansaschiro.com. Until next time, stay grounded, stay growing, and keep adjusting.